The rain hammered the cracked pavement of downtown Chicago like 1,000 tiny fists. Under the flickering neon sign of gold and pawn, two 10-year-old boys stood soaked to the bone, clutching a small velvet pouch as if it held their entire world. Because it did. Ethan and Emma had given their mother that necklace 15 years ago for her first Mother's Day after the twins were born. A thin gold chain with a tiny heart pendant, nothing expensive, but she never took it off. Not once. Until the hospital bills came. Now the same necklace lay on the glass counter while a bored pawnbroker weighed it with a sigh. $25, kids. Take it or leave it. Ethan, the older twin by 7 minutes, felt his throat close. $25 wouldn't even cover one of Mom's pills. Noah, his little brother, was already crying silently, shoulders shaking. That was the exact moment Alexander Voss walked in. Most people in Chicago knew the name. 38 years old. Billionaire CEO of Vostech. The man who'd built an empire on artificial intelligence before he could legally rent a car. Cold, ruthless, untouchable. He wore a $3,000 coat and an expression that said the world bored him. He had come to pawn a watch he no longer liked. Instead, he saw two dripping wet children trying not to fall apart while the pawnbroker counted out 5 crumpled fives. Alexander froze in the doorway. Something ancient and long-buried cracked inside his chest. "Stop," he said, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. The pawnbroker looked up, annoyed. "We're closed to looky loose, sir. I said stop." Alexander stepped forward, rain dripping from his coat onto the dirty floor. He looked at the necklace, then at the boys. "That's your mother's?" Ethan wiped his nose on his sleeve and nodded. "She has cancer. Stage 4. The hospital, they said if we don't pay something today, they'll move her out of the oncology wing. We sold everything else." Noah couldn't even speak. He just held out the velvet pouch like an offering. Alexander stared at the tiny heart pendant. His own mother had worn one almost identical. She died when he was 9. Cancer, too. He remembered the exact day the hospital sent her home because the money ran out. He remembered holding her hand while she whispered she was sorry she couldn't stay. He had been powerless then. He wasn't powerless now. He pulled out his wallet, took every bill he had. Close to $4,000, and set it on the counter. Then he unclasped the diamond-encrusted watch from his wrist, Patek Philippe, worth more than the pawn shop itself, and laid it beside the cash. "Give them the watch and the money," he told the pawnbroker. "And give them back their mother's necklace." The pawnbroker's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Alexander turned to the twins. "What hospital?" Ethan whispered the name. 20 minutes later, a black Maybach screeched to a halt outside St. Mary's Oncology Center. Alexander Voss carried Noah because the boy's legs had given out. Ethan ran beside them, clutching the velvet pouch like it might disappear. The billing department had never seen anything like it. A man in a soaked Armani coat slapped a black Amex on the counter and said, "Clear the account of Rebecca Carter. All of it. Past, present, future treatments. And I want her moved to the best room you have. Now." Nurses cried. Doctors stared. Rebecca, thin and pale in her hospital bed, thought she was hallucinating when her sons burst in, sobbing, followed by a stranger who looked like he'd walked out of a magazine. Alexander stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, unsure what to do with the storm inside him. Rebecca reached for her boys. They climbed onto the bed, burying their faces in her neck. The necklace, their necklace, was back where it belonged, warm against her skin. Alexander cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter. I lost my mother the same way. I was 9. I couldn't do anything then." His voice cracked, just slightly. "I can do something now. He paid for everything. The experimental treatment no insurance would touch. The private nurses. The apartment across from the hospital so the twins wouldn't have to ride the bus 2 hours each way. He even hired the best tutor in the city because the boys had missed months of school. But money was the easy part. The hard part was showing up. The first time he visited after the bills were paid, he brought pizza and stood awkwardly in the doorway like he didn't belong. Ethan and Noah dragged him in by the sleeves. Rebecca smiled from her bed and said, "You look like a man who's never eaten pizza with actual children before." He hadn't. Not once. So he sat on the floor and let Noah put olives on his slice for eyebrows. He let Ethan beat him at Mario Kart 17 times in a row. He listened to Rebecca tell stories about the twins when they were babies, how they used to hold hands even in their sleep. Weeks turned into months. Rebecca's hair started growing back, soft and dark. The doctors used the word remission like they couldn't believe it themselves. Alexander kept coming. Not as the billionaire. Just as Alex. One night, Ethan found him in the hallway staring at an old photo on the wall, Alexander at 9 years old, arms around a woman with tired, smiling eyes. Ethan slipped his small hand into Alexander's much larger one. "That's your mom?" Ethan asked. Alexander nodded, unable to speak. "She looks like she was really nice." "She was," he whispered. "She would have loved you too." "And your mom?" Ethan leaned his head against Alexander's side. "You're not going to disappear when mom gets better, right?" Alexander knelt so they were eye to eye. "I'm not going anywhere. Ever." A year later, Rebecca walked, slowly, carefully, down the aisle at a small garden wedding. She wore a simple white dress and the same heart necklace. Ethan and Noah, now 11, stood proudly in tiny tuxedos as ring bearers. Alexander waited at the altar, heart hammering harder than it ever had during any boardroom takeover. When the minister said, "You may kiss the bride," Alexander cupped Rebecca's face like she was made of glass and kissed her softly while the twins cheered loud enough to scare the birds from the trees. Later, at the reception, Noah tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "So, does this mean we're rich now?" Alexander laughed until tears came. "You were always rich, buddy. You had each other. And your mom. I just caught up." The camera pans out slowly on the new family dancing under string lights, Rebecca laughing in Alexander's arms, the twins trying to cut in and failing spectacularly. Sometimes, life doesn't give second chances. Sometimes it gives strangers who become fathers, mothers who beat death, and little boys who learn that love is worth more than any necklace in the world. And sometimes, one small act of kindness in a rainy pawn shop changes everything. Forever. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me the moment that made you cry, and subscribe for more stories that remind us humanity is still alive. Turn on notifications. You never know when the next one will save your faith in people. See you in the next one.